Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me for my session on flow engineering. I'm really excited to share this with you. It's going to be pretty quick, but I've got a bonus for you at the end. It's a free ebook that covers everything in the presentation and more. So if you want to get caught up, if you're really interested, you can dive really deep into that, and there'll be a link that's easy to get to. So with that, I'm going to dive right in here. So who am I and what am I talking about when I talk about flow engineering? So I'll get to flow engineering in a second, but just for a little bit of context, I've been in tech for about 20 years. I started in tech support. I've been through build and release engineering. I've been through IT management. I was a CTO at a startup, trying to get as much exposure to as many problems in tech as possible. And I think I did a pretty good job. I hit a ton of problems and I learned a ton. And flow engineering is really the culmination of everything that I learned, everything that I found that worked incredibly well, surprisingly well. And the best part is it's all backed by a ton of history. We've been doing these things in other areas of tech, other areas of business for ages. And my mission with flow engineering is really just to simplify that and deliver it in a way that's really easy to pick up and easy to use on your own, because I think everybody should be using these techniques. So first of all, what is the need for flow engineering? Why do we need something like flow engineering? And the reason that keeps coming up for me is that we keep failing in these efforts to improve, right? We're always trying to get better. We're always trying to deliver faster, higher quality, not burn out our staff. We've got to scale. We've got increasing complexity all over the place. And the thing that's missing, the big gap, is clarity, right? We don't know what's going on. We don't know where we're going. We have a bunch of different people with a bunch of different ideas. And how do we bring all that together and row in the same direction so that we can actually make progress and consistently make progress? So flow engineering is really what I like to think about as compasses and maps coming together so that we can actually navigate, right? We have a lot of compasses in the industry of tech. We have, the Spotify model. Everybody wants to be like Spotify or be like Netflix or be like Amazon. We have these targets, these North Stars. We might want to improve our deployment frequency or cut our lead time in half. These are these targets that we have to hit, but how do we get there, right? And that's where maps come in. And maps are going to show us our surroundings, but they're also going to allow us to plot a course towards our destination, whether that is going faster, improving quality, improving happiness of ourselves or our customers. All of that is achievable once we combine these compasses and maps. And I'm going to share my favorite mapping practices that allow us to do that connection between the compass points that we're heading towards and the maps of our surroundings so that we don't trip over anything on our way. So flow engineering in a very high overview, and I'll share my slides up the end of this. There'll be a link so that you can dig into this in detail, but this is also in the ebook. So at a very high level, we're talking about four basic maps. I call the 4 key maps. And they go from outcomes, starting in the right direction, really understanding where we are, to looking at flow through value stream mapping, and then looking at dependencies, things that are happening outside of the flow, and capabilities, things that are happening inside the flow. And the flow in any context, what I'm talking about when I talk about flow is any workflow in a company. It could be your hiring pipeline. It could be your onboarding. It could be onboarding your new hires or your customers. It could be onboarding partners. It could be your project planning process, your software delivery, your incident resolution. Everything in your company is a process. Everything in your company should be a value stream that's connected to a specific customer. And that's where the power of value stream mapping and looking at value streams comes in. So I'm going to show the easiest way to get started with this, because I know that this is a big area. It's pretty complex. You can dive really deep into this, but I find that a lot of people don't try, or they try and fail because it's overcomplicated. Flow engineering is really about making that simple. And I'm going to show you how simple it can be. So we start with outcomes. I mentioned outcomes because it really pays to start on the right page with everybody, right? Getting everybody together, get all of our fears and our pains and our ideas out of our heads. So this is everybody that is involved in whatever goal or outcome that we're targeting. So whether that is we need to deliver twice as fast or we need to improve quality, it could be any of those things. So we set that target, we get everybody together, and we get all of the ideas and factors affecting that outcome, contributing to that outcome, out onto a page that we can all look at. And the page in this case is a collaborative whiteboard. And this is kind of what it looks like. This is just an example, but really what we're doing is just mapping out all of the connections between our outcome, why that outcome is valuable, because it really pays to kind of consider what's really valuable about this outcome. Why should we do it at all? Why is it the most important thing that we should be doing? And then we look at obstacles. So what are the things that are going to be in our way? What could trip us up? What are we missing? Where are our gaps? And we get everybody's perspective to build this, which makes it so powerful because they're co-creating these maps, right? So we have like Sam, who's like constantly disconnected or off working on their own thing. And we bring them into the session and all of a sudden they can share, like I've been trying to tell you people for ages that this thing is a big problem. We need to tackle it. This is the opportunity to get Sam to speak up and give them a venue for sharing their perspective. And we can factor it into this outcome map. And we can also get, the super optimists who are like, I think we should do this. I think it's a huge opportunity. We can factor that in too. And then we balance everything out, right? So we get this opportunity to have really powerful conversations using the outcome map as a framework. And we build this out. You can build this out and include roles. You can include measurements. So you can have metrics targets. You could have methods, specific things that you're going to do. I like to include investigations or experiments. So what are we going to try to move us towards this outcome? And that can be really powerful, right? We make little bets. And that way, we're taking this big, giant outcome and breaking it down into small, manageable parts, right? So you just eat it one bite at a time. So that's a really powerful way to get started. We can also translate this into a roadmap, right? So look at the outcome and break it into time horizons. What are we going to do in the short term? What does this look like in the short term? What does it look like in the medium term and the long term? There's all kinds of ways you can spin this. In the Flow Engineering ebook, I take you through a very detailed example that's very specific. That's going to show you a real life example. So speaking of real life examples, this is an example of a software delivery process. Now we're looking at flow, right? So I want to take you into value stream mapping. And this is an example of a value stream map that I did quite a while ago. This is before I started using online collaborative whiteboards that have made this a lot simpler now. But this is an example of how we have this winding, long process. And you can see these highlights. You can see all this red. These are hot spots. These are where things are standing out. So we see the flow of work. We see the measurements. You see the step time and the wait time below. You also see these handoffs or these throwbacks for rework, right? Where something gets to, let's say we get to code review and we find an issue and we throw it back. We can see all kinds of things on the framework of the value stream. And in this example, we took this process, started out as 20 steps, and we shrunk it to 8 steps. So we were able to optimize the process and say, we can do a bunch of this work in parallel. There are a few steps here that we don't even need to do if we do things a little bit differently. And not only were we shrinking the number of steps and running things in parallel, we were improving on all of the performance of the individual steps by looking at, okay, what's involved in this step? What do we need to do? Where are we getting value from it? How do we trim it down and make sure that, we're increasing the value and reducing the waste? And all of that was possible through mapping the value stream so we could have a conversation about it, right? Because then all of a sudden we could point to specific things. Let's look at step 4, like what's going on when we do code review. What's the hardest thing about it, right? What are the issues that we're catching? So we have this framework, this visual framework that makes it really easy for us to have a conversation, whether it's with marketing or the CEO or other executives or partners or a new hire who just joined the company. Everybody can be speaking the same language, pointing to the same thing, and seeing the same perspective, which is super powerful. So what happens with this? You go from 20 steps to 8 steps, you go from 9 weeks to 1 week, and then you also get all these benefits of bringing the team together, right? It's a team building exercise. So all of a sudden, the leadership empathizes with the contributors and understands why things take so long, why we have so many issues in production. We can see them. We can see where things are breaking down and where the team is getting bogged down with constraints or bottlenecks. So to sum up, like what we're looking at when we look at a value stream map, this is the mural version. This is the current version of a value stream map that I build with my clients. So we see the steps horizontally, right? This is the flow of activities. Each of these is a step that you define, and you define whatever you like. This can be zoomed out, and you could talk about a high-level process, your release process, perhaps. But you could zoom in and you could look at incident response. What happens when someone reports an incident in production? What happens step by step? And anything in between. You can look at sprints, you can look at projects, whatever you like. You can look at migrating an app from your data center to the cloud, that process, right? You can dial it in by illustrating all these sequential steps. So you see the step timing above, the delay timing below. Here, what we're looking at is by comparing all the measurements, we can see that there's 2 bottlenecks here, right? There's 2 areas where most of the time is being taken up. So all of a sudden we go from the problem could be anywhere, and 8 people have different opinions of where the bottleneck is based on their perspective, to 2 focal points, and 2 focal points that we can rank. We can say A is more valuable than B. So let's focus on A. But if we have capacity, let's do both at the same time, right? That's super powerful. So all of a sudden, instead of, it could be anything, it's 2 things. One is higher priority than the other. That's fantastic, right? So let's look at a real life case of this. So this is an example of let's say it's a deployment process. It's kind of zoomed in. We're zooming way in here. We're looking at what does it take to get an artifact deployed to production so that a stakeholder can actually validate that we built the right thing. So we've zoomed in here, but what we can see is that we have a target. So the target in blue was like a hypothesis. The team was like, we think if we tackle artifact deployment, we're going to make really big progress. And this is going to be so much faster if we just automate artifact deployment. But once you measure the value stream, what you're able to see is that there's 2 other areas, right? We have updating the environment, and then we have acceptance testing. And what's interesting about these is that they're actually prioritized, and we can ignore artifact deployment because priority 1 is much, much bigger. And how much bigger? It's 100 times bigger than artifact deployment. And priority 2 is 10 times bigger. So we've gone from a target that didn't actually matter that much to 2 targets that really matter and are really holding us back. And so what happens with that is that after mapping this process and seeing this visually, everybody on the team agrees that we can focus on number 1 and number 2 and ignore the rest for now, and we can come back to it later, which aligns everybody on the team. We stop working on everything that we think is important. So as a result of this, you save $20 million by investing in the right place, and you save 18 months of not investing time in something that's not going to actually affect performance, right? When you invest in the right area, it means that you're not wasting time investing in the wrong area. So you go twice as fast, because if you invest in the wrong area and then try again, you've got all that time just piling up. So this is really valuable to avoid wasting time in the wrong areas. So what else do we have? We do dependency mapping, right? There's 4 maps. This is map number 3. Dependency mapping looks outside of the value stream. So outside of that flow, what's affecting the flow from the outside? So if we look at the example of the last case, environment update. So who's updating the environment? Maybe not the team that we're talking to. Maybe it's some other team, a shared services team, an IT team, and we got to go to them. That's why it takes so long. We have to go outside. We depend on them to update the environment. And same with acceptance testing. Maybe we have to go to a QA department, and that's why that takes so long. So the dependency mapping is going to show where are those things outside that are slowing us down, and we can visualize those. We can also add measurements to this, right? So if you have SLAs, if we're going to a QA department and they have a 10-day SLA to test all the code in a release, then we know it's probably going to be 10 days, right? So who cares how fast our value stream is if we have this 10-day bottleneck, right? If we're trying to shrink from 12 days to 8 days, and 10 of the days are in one department outside of our team, we should probably know that, right? And we should be able to say to them, here's a map of all the things that we depend on. This is where most of our time is being spent. And it would really help us if we could trim down this SLA. That's a conversation that you can have when you provide this map, right? And you can point to this thing very specifically. It's easy to understand. It's easy to get on board and aligned with. So the next piece is we look inside. The 4th map is the capability map. We look inside the value stream at the capabilities of the team. And I don't mean skills and I don't mean individuals. What we're looking at is in the context of the stream. So in the context of our example, our environment update, right? What are the capabilities we need to update the environment ourselves? We would need to know how to provision cloud servers maybe, or deploy containers, or spin up or create containers, create artifacts. So do we have those skills inside of the team? Do we have those capabilities? Do we have training? Do we have access to APIs? Do we have documentation? This is what we reveal when we do capability mapping. So we take the value stream, we take the hotspots that we found the bottlenecks in, and we look at what are the capabilities that are going to help us remove those bottlenecks. So we don't look at every capability, right? That's a waste of time. We care about our bottlenecks. We care about where we're being affected, whether it's performance or quality. And then we say, how do we close the gap between where we are and where we want to be so that we can remove those bottlenecks? And if we're going to be going outside of the team to do that, the fastest way to do it is to bring it in, right? So we want to look outside and say, okay, well, if we were to adopt this capability internally, then what would it take, right? What would it take for us to do that? And the capability mapping is going to show us, okay, well, we're pretty rough. We don't really know how to do automated testing. So we're going to have to either adopt some capability. Maybe we need training. Maybe we need to bring a tester into the team so that we can do it internally. You can look at different opportunities, but you're now able to focus on just the gaps instead of everything that everyone thinks is a problem. So to wrap that up, we've got 4 maps. The 4 maps flow through each other, right? The magic of this is that we start with outcomes. The outcomes are going to tell us what stream to focus on. Then we map that stream. Then we look at what's affecting that stream from the outside, what's causing those hotspots and bottlenecks. And then we look at what's going to help us remove those bottlenecks in terms of capabilities that we need or capabilities that we need to support. And so flow engineering has its own flow through these 4 maps where you go from we want to get to X, whatever your target is, to knowing exactly what you need to do to get there. And all of this is done collaboratively. So you can see examples of all these 4 maps here. You can see this is all interactive. We get everybody contributing here. It's a team building exercise that gets people really excited and engaged. And they see how everything works, but also how they contribute to the value stream, how they fit into the big picture. And so an example that might appeal to folks now, we have the DORA 4 key metrics, right? Everybody is concerned with lead time, deployment frequency, mean time to restore, and percent complete inaccurate, right? In production defects. And so you can use any of these as a target, right? You could use any of these as a target outcome. Let's say your target outcome is we want to cut our lead time in half. Flow engineering is going to give you 4 maps that are going to take you from that target all the way to here's exactly what we need to do to cut our lead time in half. And that's really powerful. So the whole flow of this process goes from outcome mapping to learning about value streams, because once you can see your organization in terms of value streams, everything gets a lot easier, right? You have a model for understanding the flow of value through the organization. You can have a conversation with business folks, marketing, sales, and everyone can speak the same language, which is super powerful. And then you get into this flow engineering piece of value stream mapping, where we map the value stream, we find those hotspots, then we go through dependencies, then we go through capabilities. We can start to build a roadmap of all of the insights, all of the opportunities that we find, all of the things that are going to make a difference. And we can even scale this well beyond a single team, right? You can start facilitating these workshops across your organization. You can have an enabling team that works with individual value stream teams, product teams, or project teams to optimize their flow and really scale these efforts to whatever size organization that you're interested in or that you're participating in. I've used this everywhere from 3-person startups to 100,000 person organizations. It works exactly the same every single time. You have different scales. You have many more maps when you're doing this at larger scales, but it works exactly the same way. So if you're interested in more detail, if you're interested in trying this yourself, I would encourage you to go to flow.visible.is. This is a free ebook that covers everything from start to finish, a lot more context, a lot more information, more examples. There's frequently asked questions that dive into common areas that I haven't woven into the book yet. But I'm always iterating on this. It's always developing. I'm really open to feedback about it and ideas. I would love to hear from you. What you're finding works well. If you're doing collaborative mapping, if you've done a collaborative mapping workshop in your organization, let me know in the chat. I would love to hear whether people are doing this or doing other things like event storming, impact mapping. There's all kinds of different ways that we can be using these techniques. And I think we're just getting started with this stuff, right? A lot of this stuff just got unlocked because of COVID and working remotely. But I think this collaborative mapping is such a superpower that I want to see everybody doing it. And I want to learn from everybody who's seeing success and solving problems using these techniques. So that's it for me. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you checking this out. And I would love to hear from you. Shoot me an email and let me know what you thought about the presentation. If you've tried collaborative mapping yourself, if you've tried and failed, I would love to share tips with you and help you through any challenges or questions that you have. But thanks very much for joining me.